Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Good evening. You're watching the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. Greetings and best wishes of His Majesty the Sultan to Her Excellency the President of Brazil are conveyed by the Sultanate's accredited ambassador to Brazil. The United Nations says violence in Iraq in 2014 killed 12,282 civilians, making it the deadliest year since the sectarian bloodshed. And Libya makes more progress in extinguishing a fire at oil storage tanks at the country's biggest oil port that has been raging for a week. Good evening once again, and thank you for joining us. Those were the headlines, and now for the detail. Greetings and best wishes of His Majesty Sultan Qaboos to Her Excellency the President of Brazil of good health and for Brazilian people further progress and prosperity were conveyed by His Excellency Dr. Khalid bin Saeed Al Jaradi, Sultanate's accredited ambassador to Brazil, at the participation in an inauguration ceremony of Her Excellency Dilma Rousseff, President of Brazil for the second term. The ceremony was attended by representatives of international missions and organizations to Brazil. The United Nations said in a statement that violence in Iraq in 2014 killed at least 12,282 civilians, making it the deadliest year since the sectarian bloodshed of 2006-2007. The majority of the deaths, nearly 8,500, occurred during the second half of the year following expansion of the insurgency in June out of Anbar province, leading to widespread clashes with security forces. Daesh fighters still controlled roughly a third of Iraq. The army and militia continue to battle the insurgents. The figures show that violence has not abated since 2013, when 7,818 civilians were killed. In December, the United Nations said that a total of 1,101 Iraqis were killed in acts of violence, including 651 civilians, 29 policemen, and a further 421 members of the security forces. Thousands of combatants have been killed in clashes involving Iraqi army forces, militia, militants, tribal forces, and Kurdish Peshmerga. Fighting in urban areas has taken a particular toll on civilians' populations. The bloodshed was worst in Baghdad in December, where 320 civilians were killed, followed by Anbar province to the west, with 164 dead. The United States and its allies staged 29 airstrikes on Daesh targets in Syria and Iraq. The action in Syria included 17 strikes near the cities of Al-Raqqa, Deir az-Zur, and Ain al-Arab Kobani. A variety of buildings, fighting positions and units were hit. In Iraq, 12 strikes targeted Daesh buildings, fighting positions and units near the cities of Mosul, Fallujah and Sinjar. Fighters, bombs and remotely controlled aircraft were used against Daesh, which has taken parts of Syria and Iraq in a bloody campaign to establish their state. Countless children in the embattled Gaza Strip faces a personal battle to overcome the trauma and psychological damage caused by the violence. Here is a report.
The aftermath of an Israeli missile attack on the 16th of July 2014. Shells hit a beach in the Gaza Strip where Palestinian children were playing. 11-year-old Muntasa survived, but his brother and 3 of his cousins were killed. 5 months later, he's still haunted by the memory and filled with hate for those responsible.
I dream of taking a Kalashnikov and attacking them. I want to shoot them because they killed my brother.
About 500 Palestinian children were killed during the 7 weeks of Israeli bombardment, which was launched to destroy Hamas tunnels and rocket facilities. Those who survived their physical injuries are left with emotional scars, which are harder to see and more difficult to heal.
He tied a rope and brought it into the living room to hang his cousins. If we hadn't seen, he would have strangled them. He doesn't even know what he's doing.
Children as young as 6 years old have already lived through 3 wars in Gaza. Volunteer groups are trying to help some of these children come to terms with their trauma.
They
have nightmares, they cry at night, they want to sleep in the same bed as their parents. They feel frightened and useless. Suddenly, children of 5 years old start speaking like babies, so we try to give them some stability.
Half of Gaza's 2 million inhabitants are under 14 years old, and there's not enough rehabilitation for these children who are growing up with the scars of war.
A member of a firefighting crew said that Libya has made more progress in extinguishing a fire at oil storage tanks at the country's biggest oil port, Sider, that has been raging for 1 week. NASA released photos of smoke rising from a fire set by a rocket at a storage tank at the eastern Libyan oil of Port Sider. The rocket strike occurred last Thursday, December 26, as armed factions allied to competing government fought for control of the country's biggest export terminal. Clashes were also reported from Sirte, a city west of Sider, killing up to 19 people, among them 14 guards at a power plant, residents said. Sider and its adjacent Ras Lanouf terminal have been closed since a force allied to a rival government in Tripoli moved east, trying to take them, part of a struggle between former rebels who helped topple Muammar al-Gaddafi in 2011. But now fight for power and a share of oil reserves. An oil ministry official said the storage tank was still on fire. Smoke could be seen on pictures posted on social media website and described as showing the port. A spokesman for the State National Oil Corps said the fighting has reduced Libya's crude output to 352,000 barrels a day. Only the Brega, Serir, Mesla and offshore operations were still producing. Sider and Ras Lanouf ports had been processing an estimated 300,000 barrels per day. Ships and aircraft crisis crossed the seas of Borneo today, hunting for the wreck of an Indonesian Air Asia passenger jet. But bad weather was again hindering the search for the plane and the black box flight recorders that should reveal why it crashed. Pieces of the broken up plane have been found in the Indonesian-led search for flight QZ8501 that is concentrated on 1,575 square nautical miles of the northern Java Sea, but the wreckage of the aircraft is yet to be located. Strong winds and heavy seas have stopped divers from looking for the fuselage of the Airbus A320-200, which plunged into the water on Sunday, December 28, while en route from Indonesia's second biggest city, Surabaya, to Singapore with 162 people on board. On board the flight QZ8501 were 155 Indonesians, 3 South Koreans and 1 person each from Singapore, Malaysia and Britain. The co-pilot was French. A U.S. helicopter brought more plane crash bodies to shore today as the number of recovered victims from the Indonesia's plane crash rose to 30. Tugboats hold the burned-out hulk of the ferry that caught fire on Sunday off the coast of Greece to a southern Italian port today, opening the way for an investigation into the cause of the blaze that killed at least 11 people. Listing visibly to start aboard the normal Atlantic multi-deck car and truck ferry was held outside the port of Brindisi as officials decided where it should be moored. The fire broke out on one of the lower garage levels and left the vessels drifting without power in stormy seas. It took Greek and Italian rescue teams 36 hours to evacuate 477 passengers and crew from the ship amid strong winds. Italian officials have said that most were winched into the helicopter from the upper deck of the ship as the blaze raged below, but dozens may still be missing, including migrants not listed on the ship's manifest. Reports of the number of missing have varied widely. The Greek Coast Guard said yesterday that 18 are still unaccounted for. You're watching the Sultanate of Oman television, and still to come in our news bulletin. Calls himself the traffic droid Lewis Didier is on a mission to make London's roads safer for cyclists. Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. Nizwa historical fort witnessed during this touristic season scores of visitors from inside and outside the Sultanate to review its potentials, civilization and deep-rooted heritage and glorious concepts written by humans on that era. The fort, surrounded by a number of touristic landmarks, namely traditional markets and old villages. The architecture of the fort showcased Omani human genius in building the fort, considered as a comprehensive history of events. The fort provided information on heritage on both Arabic and English language. It also distinguished by the huge round-shaped tower next to the tower of the fort entrance. The visitors also will find wall art pieces which narrated the history of the fort. The mountainous areas in the Wilaya of Mhadha are considered one of the beautiful natural touristic sites in the Governorate of Al-Buremi. The Medal and Cave public parks in the Governorate are both surrounded by palm trees and greenery that add more beauty to their attraction. The Cave Park includes a section for motorbikes, children playgrounds and sports. The Medal Park is distinguished by places for family gatherings, small bridges across the park, as well as stairway that leads to top of the mountain, where a nice view of the Wilaya of Mhadha gives the visitors a peace of mind while they enjoy the natural scenery. Dozens of British cyclists started recording reckless drivers with helmet-mounted cameras and passing the evidence on to police. More details in the following report.
He calls himself the traffic droid. Armed with his red card, he is on a mission to make London's roads safer for cyclists.
Stop! Stop! Wind down your window. You almost knocked me down just now. Do you know that? No. You pathetic driver! Red card to you. Reported to the police. Dangerous man! Move!
As well as his red card, Lewis is equipped with horns, lights and 8 cameras. Every day on his 2-hour ride to work, he films drivers jumping red lights or using their mobile phones and then passes the footage on to police. His safety obsession all began when he almost died in a road accident.
Personally, I've experienced the full wrath of a car hitting me head on, and I thought I was going to lose my life. And this is what started to get me thinking that, what am I going to do to make things better on the road? So I decided maybe, start to report people, but that was before I became traffic droid. And then another accident happened to me, then I said, no more. Somebody has to do something. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to work with the police, and I'm going to use YouTube to shame these drivers.
Lewis is one of dozens of British cyclists recording reckless drivers in this way. The authorities were wary at first of these carriageway vigilantes, but every case is now treated on its merits. And Lewis claims to have a good track record.
How many cases per day? I tell you something, I'll say on average about 25. And out of that 25, I report 4 every day, because I assess the situation, if it's very bad or if it's a mistake. If it's a mistake, that's forgivable, but if it's a deliberate act of ignorance on the roads, then I actually report them.
Some will be fined and even lose their licence. Not everyone on the road appreciates his efforts.
A lot of the cyclists are a problem, to be honest.
Drivers do bad things.
You know.
How about cyclists then?
But with an average of 15 cyclists' deaths every year in London and fewer policemen on the streets, the so-called traffic droid is unlikely to hang up his helmet anytime soon.
And now for the general weather forecast. Clear skies will prevail over the Sultanate with chances of low clouds and fog in the governorates of Musandam, Al-Dhahira, Al-Wusta, North and South Al-Sharqiyya, Dhafar and coastal areas overlooking Sea of Oman. Winds will be northwesterly light to moderate. Seas will be moderate along the coastal areas overlooking Arabian Sea with a maximum wave height of 2 meters, while along the rest of the Sultanate's coast it will be slight with a maximum wave height of 1.25 meters. This is the Sultanate of Oman television, and now before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. Greetings and best wishes of His Majesty the Sultan to Her Excellency the President of Brazil are conveyed by the Sultanate's accredited ambassador to Brazil. Violence in Iraq into 2014 killed 12,282 civilians, making it the deadliest year since the sectarian bloodshed. And Libya makes more progress in extinguishing a fire at oil storage tanks at the country's biggest oil port that has been raging for a week. With that, we come to an end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studios, it's good night.